So we already know this, right? AI is making the most productive people even more productive. What's quietly changed in the last year or so is that if you can build a system, not just type prompts, if you're a systems thinker, you can do the work of an entire content team all by yourself. And today, I'm going to show you how to build one of those systems. 8 Claude use cases getting progressively more complex that together form a YouTube SEO pipeline. Hi, I'm Edward Wood, co-founder of Humble&Brag, the full-stack YouTube agency for startups. So your YouTube SEO strategy now has to win on 3 surfaces, not just one. There's YouTube search itself, where you've always had to be present. There's Google search for the volume and the high intent visitors it sends to your site. And there's AI search for the quality of those visitors and the brand recall that the citations build. And the use cases I'm about to show you help you win across all those 3 surfaces in one workflow. So let's take a look at the first use case. Use case 1, Claude is your SEO sparring partner. So the first use case is the simplest, and it's the one I'd start with if you're new to all this. Just open Claude in chat mode and have a proper conversation about what's actually happening to SEO right now. The chat I'd recommend goes something like this. What's changed about SEO in the last 18 months? How does YouTube fit into the answer? What signals do AI search tools actually pick up on? So you're definitely not asking Claude to write anything yet. You're using it in the way you'd use a smart consultant on a video call. You're basically sparring. And if you want to take it up a notch, here's a move that I've been using more and more. You basically play Claude and Gemini off each other, especially Gemini Deep Research. So Gemini will read across the web in a different way to Claude, and the two of them often disagree, and that disagreement can be pretty productive and useful in itself. That way you learn faster and you end up with a sharper view than either model alone would give you. Not only that, the conversation will also take you down some genuinely useful rabbit holes. So a few things that I've learned this way in the last few months: the importance of watch pages for company channels, what schema markup actually does, and how question formations in chapter titles can surface your video in AI overviews more efficiently. And none of those things are obvious, and they all came out of this process of sparring. But at the end of the day, the real reason to start here isn't the answers. It's that this is where you build the skill of working with Claude properly. And it's also how you begin to build skills in Claude. Every Claude skill we use started life as a long, scrappy chat where I was basically figuring out what good looked like. The skill then came afterwards. So if you can't have a good conversation with Claude about your SEO strategy, you probably won't be able to write a good skill about it either. So this first hour is all about teaching yourself how to teach Claude, how to teach you. That's the warm-up. Now we move into operationalizing those conversations, and that's where skills come in. And the first skill that we need to build is positioning. So the second use case is using Claude to operationalize positioning for your YouTube channel. So you might be wondering, we're talking about SEO, not branding, so why are we starting with positioning? First up, there's more competition and more content than ever now. Every brand has a YouTube channel, whether it's active or dormant, and most of them look pretty similar. Positioning is what differentiates your content enough that it actually lands with your viewers and your target customers. Second up, positioning makes sure that you're producing content for your ICP, for your ideal customer, and not chasing generic traffic that will never convert anyway. A keyword with 50,000 searches a month is pretty useless if nobody who searches for it would buy from you anyway. And thirdly, positioning shapes the CTAs. Once a viewer has built trust with you by watching one of your videos, they need a natural next step. And good positioning is what makes that step obvious. Without it, you'll have a channel full of viewers and a funnel that just doesn't really connect to it. So we've built a Claude skill based on April Dunford's positioning framework, the one from her book, Obviously Awesome. Now, Dunford's book is essentially the playbook for operationalizing positioning, which is exactly the kind of fundamental context that doesn't change much for your company. And it's perfect for embedding in a skill. For the best results, you can layer this with a workshop. This skill works on whatever inputs you give it. So if you run a proper positioning workshop and feed the outputs into the skill, you get a much richer document than if you just scrape your website and scrape YouTube. And this document basically becomes the context for everything else. Every video idea gets pressure tested against it, every title and every script. And the other effect that this positioning has is on the keyword choices that you make. Because once you have this clear positioning, you stop chasing all those high volume generic terms and you start dominating the low volume specific terms that actually map to your customer's problem. A few years ago, those might not have been worth writing about or making a video about, but with the rest of the pipeline that I'm about to show you, they definitely are. So that's positioning and the first skill built. Next, we're going to start connecting Claude to the rest of our toolkit. So the third use case is research, and this is the one that's changed the most about how we work day to day because it's saved us so much time. So the most important connectors for us right now are the YouTube API directly, vidIQ for trend data, Google Search Console, Ahrefs for keyword opportunities, including AI search visibility, and Gemini. Now there are plenty of others you can hook up, like Perplexity and social listening tools, your CRM or your analytics, but these are the 5 that are doing the heaviest lifting for us currently. And you might be asking us, well, why Gemini when you've already got Claude? Well, Gemini is the only model that can directly analyze the contents of YouTube videos currently, and that means frame-by-frame analysis, audio and visual all together. Claude can read transcripts, which is fine, but Gemini actually watches the video. So when we want to know not just what a competitor said, but what they showed, what graphics they used, where the energy lifted, Gemini does that best. So what's important to understand here, and what you've probably already noticed, is that what we're doing is layering. The connectors are giving us the data, and the skills are giving us the process. And on top of that, you can layer frameworks, like Dunford's for positioning, Hormozi's for titles, and structural frameworks for scripts. And each layer makes the next one more useful. So the skill is only as good as the data the connector feeds it, and the output is only as good as the framework that the skill applies. And that's basically the operating system: connectors plus skills plus frameworks. So we've got positioning, we've got research. The next step is the brief. And this is where we move from the level of the channel strategy to the level of the single video. So the killer move in briefing is basically using Claude to find outliers. And outliers are the videos in your niche that have wildly outperformed the average. And this kind of outlier strategy that's super popular with YouTube creators used to take hours by hand. You'd basically go to YouTube, search the topic, click into a creator's channel, sort by most popular, and then just look at the views relative to subscriber count. Then do it again on the next channel and the next, which would take hours. But with the connectors, Claude can do it directly. It pulls the data via the YouTube API, calculates a performance ratio for every video against the channel's baseline, and surfaces the ones that really took off. And there's another advantage of using Claude to do this. When you do this by hand, you're naturally biased. You're probably searching in your language, you're getting served videos in your geography, you're looking at channels you already know, and you probably missed the breakout that happened in German, for example, or the one from a creator in a completely different niche whose title and format might really work for yours. And Claude doesn't have those biases. It's agnostic about language, it's agnostic about geography and which channels you've heard of. And so the outliers it surfaces are often the ones you'd never have found yourself. And those are often also the most useful ones. And so in the end, you get delivered this brief with the topic, the keywords, the reference videos, the patterns they share, and the reasons why your video should be successful. So once you've got your brief, you need to hone and decide upon your title. And that's what we're going to look at next. So there are 2 ways your video gets discovered on YouTube. There's search, where someone is actively typing a query into the search bar, and browse, where YouTube serves your video up to someone on their homepage or in the suggested video sidebar. And these 2 engines serve 2 very different viewers, and they want completely different titles. The search viewer is basically on a mission. They've typed in a specific question and they want an answer. And so the search title needs to be a clean match for that query. It needs to be direct, and it needs to be descriptive, and it probably isn't all that clever. The browse viewer, on the other hand, is in a completely different frame of mind. They've been shown your video alongside 10 or 20 others that they didn't ask for, and so the browse title has to spike curiosity and stand out from the crowd. And our tightening skill produces both. It generates 10 search optimized titles for the SEO play, structured around clean query matches and high intent keywords, and separately, it generates browse optimized titles using Alex Hormozi's value equation: dream outcome, perceived likelihood, time delay, and level of effort and sacrifice. A title that doesn't hit at least 2 of those probably won't win the click in the feed. So then you get 2 pools of options for the same video, and then you can pick based on which surface that you're trying to win. Right, the brief's done, the titles are locked in. Now the bit that everyone thinks AI is bad at: writing the actual script. You probably know the feeling if you've used ChatGPT or Claude without any context or skills or projects to write a YouTube script, that you end up with something that reads a little bit like a LinkedIn post crossed with a press release. So it's got a generic intro and a generic structure and a generic sign-off and bad rhythm. And the reason for that isn't the underlying model, is that you ask that model in one prompt to basically do the work of an entire team. And this is what I've learned over the past few months. You don't get good output from one big skill that does everything end to end. You get good output from skills that basically mirror the human roles in the original process, with all the checks and balances that typically exist between them. Think about how this is done in your content team. The work is passed between people, so the researcher does the research, the brief gets written, a writer creates the script, and an editor edits the script. And each of these handovers was a check on the previous step that ensures the quality of the final piece of work. So the skills we've built mirror this exact structure. There's a research skill, there's a briefing skill, there's a script writing skill that takes the brief as the input, and there's a copy editing skill that critiques the script. So each one does a job, and the next one in the sequence checks the previous one's work. And the other thing that goes into the script is obviously my voice. And we use Whisper Flow a lot in order to be able to get our thoughts down on paper quickly. So we walk and talk, and that transcript becomes the raw material that the briefing and scripting skills work from. So you can see it like this. The structure comes from the skill, but the voice comes from us. And here's why that's important for SEO. Structured scripts that don't drift are exactly what search engines and iEngines reward. A clearly structured script earns longer watch time, which earns higher rankings on YouTube. It also gets transcribed cleanly, which earns more citations in AI search, for example. So the two basically move together. So once you've got a script, the next step is one that I'm currently working on refining. And it's important because it's connected to one of the bigger algorithm shifts of the last 18 months. So here's the context. YouTube has fairly openly been adapting Google's Gemini model for its recommendation system on YouTube. And the main thing to understand here is that the algorithm is no longer just looking at titles and tags and watch time. It's really reading on-screen text, it's recognizing visuals, and it's analyzing tone. And what that means for creators and companies is that the on-screen graphics in your videos, the supers, the diagrams, the B-roll labels, are all now ranking signals in their own right. And this is something that we typically left to the editors. But the skill that I'm developing now basically reads through a finished script and flags every moment where a graphic or a diagram or a piece of B-roll would reinforce what's being said. So instead of the editor starting with a blank screen and a transcript, they start with a brief with plenty of suggestions of the kind of graphics they could implement and the kind of wording that they could use on those graphics. So the video script is done, the editor notes are in. Now the bit that turns all of this from a simple content workflow into an actual SEO system. And this is the bit that I'd recommend you pay particular attention to. Use case 8, YouTube-first SEO. In our experience, the difference between a company YouTube channel that works and one that doesn't isn't always about just the videos. It's about how well the channel is woven into the rest of the marketing. The blog, the funnel, the socials, the website. So this last use case is about building YouTube into that ecosystem, and specifically the flywheel that's been driving most of our blog growth this year, which we call YouTube-first SEO. And here's how it works. Once it's running, everything we've talked about so far, the research, the briefing, the scripting, gets plugged into it. So you start with your existing articles. You look at the ones that are performing well in Search Console, so they have good impressions, healthy click-through rates, and good number of clicks, and then you filter for the articles that don't yet have a video. Those are your candidates. You already know there's demand because the article is ranking, and you already have authority on the topic because Google's already chosen to surface you. And that then becomes the input for a new video. The brief gets pressure tested against the positioning skill from use case 2. The outlier analysis from use case 4 verifies the demand. And the titling skill from use case 5 produces both pools of titles for search and for browse. The script writing and editor note skills then produce the scripts and the brief for the final edit. And then the video gets produced. And off the back of that one video, we can generate 4 or 5 new articles with different angles on a similar topic, each targeting a different cluster of keywords. The video then gets embedded in each of them, and each of these pages has schema so that Google can understand what it is and can surface those key moments in AI overviews and in the search pages. And the end result is that articles rank, so traffic comes to the site, visitors watch the embedded videos, the videos get good watch time from a high intent audience, and both the article and the video start to improve in their rankings. So if we take a step back from those 8 use cases, you can see that we've built an entire content pipeline, with Claude doing a lot of the heavy lifting without us losing our voice. And we've layered connectors and skills and frameworks to make sure that this pipeline is as effective as possible. If you want to go deeper into the system, you want to learn about the schema, the watch pages, the AI search visibility piece, then check out this video. I'll see you there, and thanks for watching.